Hey guys, how's it going? It's Dev here, and today I've got another exciting tutorial for you guys. I'm going to be showing you a new method on how we can extract Google Maps and put it directly into Blender, and then through Blender we can chuck it into Revit, Sketchup, and also Rhino, right? So we can actually export the mesh that we get and export it as a point cloud so we can use it in Revit directly, or we can export the textured mesh and then we can use it in visualization software such as Enscape, Lumion, and Twinmotion, right? This workflow is a lot easier because we are going to be looking at the BLOSM plugin that allows us to essentially just select part of the screen that we want on our maps and it will extract it straight into Blender, and then we can export what we need from there. Okay, one thing to note is that this workflow is completely for free. You are going to have to actually enter your credit card information just to kind of verify that you're a legit user, but that's it. Okay, so if you guys do enjoy this video or you actually end up using the workflow and you found it helpful, I would very much appreciate it if you can leave a like on this video. It does help the channel quite a bit. And one other thing is I've also put the Discord community down below, right, just in case you guys want to join. And I do want to say thank you to these two guys on the screen because I did watch their tutorials and string them together in order to find out how to get the mesh into Blender in the best quality, so then afterwards we could export it into our architectural software. So thanks to these guys, and yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so here's a quick overview of the workflow. We are going to use the BLOSM plugin in Blender to extract the Google Maps API, and then we're going to import this back to Blender. And once we have our city in Blender, we can export it as an FBX so we can import it into SketchUp, Rhino, or Enscape. However, if we do want to use this point cloud to use it directly in Revit, we are going to need recap photo to then process the mesh into a point cloud so then we can import it directly into Revit. You should have the majority of this software if you're a student, part of the Autodesk AEC collection. However, the only exception is the Rhino license, of course, and as well as Enscape, which I do believe they do provide student licenses for, so make sure you check that out. For the first part, in terms of software that we need, the first thing that we need is Blender, and as you can see, I'm linking this down below in the description. The version that I'm using for this tutorial is 3.6.5 in case you want to follow along. The next thing that we need is the BLOSM plugin, right? So there is two versions of this plugin. The first one is free, and that's the one that we're going to use on this tutorial. It works completely fine. When you get to Gumroad, you can literally just hit 0 here and just say, I want this, okay? So over here, we are going to extract the Google Maps from using this plugin, and we are going to get the textures from it. And just to note, there is a premium version of this plugin. We don't need it for the tutorial, but just in case you want to support the creator, or in case you want to look at stuff with OpenStreetMap, right? We're not going to focus on the tutorial, but feel free to check this out on your own leisure. They do have documentation, which I will link down below, or it's linked here. And as you can see, just in case you want to follow this tutorial, you can look at the documentation that they have, and they even explain stuff about like getting the Google Maps API key and a little bit of stuff saying stuff about its usage limits, right? So they've actually linked a lot of stuff here that you need for the plugin, which is really helpful. And the one last thing that we need, this is the Simply Gone plugin, okay? So you just need to go to downloads, or you can actually go back, and as long as you hit get it now, this plugin is going to start downloading for you, okay? This is a plugin that's by Microsoft. You do, as long as you sign in with your Microsoft email, it'll be totally fine. Don't worry, it's a legit plugin from them. Okay, so the second thing we need is the Google API key, right? So I'm going to put this link in the description. This guide will explain for you how to get it, but I'm going to walk you through. One thing to note though is that even though this is free for up to 3 months, right? Like I said, you are going to actually have to put in your payment information, but it's Google, it's trusted. Afterwards, if you want to see how much it's going to cost you, you can look at this guide here, and they've even got something like usage limits. I haven't used it that long, so feel free to read this document. But overall, what we need to do is we need to get our Google API key. So the link I've got here. So over here, I'm just going to click on the first one that says creating your API key. So you need to sign in on your Google account, and then you need to click on the go to credentials page, right? So over here, I'm actually signing in on my Google account. And then if you don't have a project, what you need to do is just create a project. There you go, and you can call it anything. And I'm just going to hit create. Great, and once that's created, you can see I was put somewhere else. Now in my project 3307, I can go to keys and credentials, right? So over here, what I want to do is, I actually want to agree and continue, blah, blah, blah. You can see it's telling you what you're going to get, all this stuff on the API. I mean, feel free to read this. I'm just doing this through the tutorial. Payment verification is needed. I'm obviously going to blank out this stuff. So as you can see here, I've approved my payment of $0 or £0 to my bank, and then it says finish project setting up, right? And then over here, you're going to have to fill in this list. So once you've done that, however you need to do, I'm just going to say I'm here to explore all this different stuff. You can do it as you need. And once we've done that, you can see you're going to get your API key, right? I've blurred it out. You keep your API key private. That's something you guys need to do in general if you're doing this type of stuff. But you can see it says enable all Maps APIs for this project and create budget alerts. Sure, why not? So now you go to the Google Maps platform, right? And now over here, what you do is you need to protect your API, restriction type. I'm just going to hit maybe later. You actually don't want it restricted, right? So for this one, you can see it says maps project needed to use map API. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to paste that API key that I've gotten before, but just in case you forget it, you can go to keys and credentials, right? Once you've actually set it up, and then over here you can hit show key, and then of course you can copy it onto your clipboard, right? So I've got mine set up. And one more thing that you need to do is you need to go to API and services. So once you go to API and services, the one that we need is the map tiles API, right? So you're just going to go here and hit enable, and now you're done. Now we can actually extract Google Maps and chuck it into Blender. So what you need to do now is actually install the Simply Gone SDK. You know, just install it. I've already got it installed, but you can select it as a free version. Like I said, you are going to have to sign in through your Microsoft email account, but that's totally fine. It is legit, right? Microsoft actually owns this company. And with this BLOSM plugin, from my previous tutorial, I don't think quite a few people know Blender, but you don't have to extract this, right? You can leave it as a .zip, and then we are going to install this plugin through the .zip file, right? So there's no need to extract this. So now that we've got our key and our software downloaded, all we have to do is open Blender, and I'll show you how we can get going. So I'm going to open Blender 3.6. Okay, so as soon as we've opened Blender, we need to actually enable the plugins that we've downloaded, right? So you can just click anywhere on the screen to dismiss this message. And for those of you that don't know Blender, here's a quick crash course on navigating, right? So I can just select everything on my screen here, and I can press delete on my keyboard to get rid of them. If I press down my middle mouse button only, and I move my mouse, you can see I start orbiting around the screen, right? If I press shift and I hold down my middle mouse button, you can see I start panning around the screen, right? Or just moving my camera. And then through my middle mouse wheel, I can just scroll, and then it will zoom in and out. So all we need basically to navigate is the middle mouse wheel, and then whenever you want to move, you just need to press shift. All right, really easy to use. So to now actually enable the plugins that we've installed, we need to go to edit, preferences, and over here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write Simply Gone 10. Like I said, you did have to install this first, and then we're just going to enable it. Right, great. Now the next thing we need to do is actually enable the BLOSM plugin that we've downloaded. So first of all, what we need to do is we need to install it. So I need to go to install. And then like I said before, all you need to do is just you need to go to that zip folder, and then all you need to do is just hit install add-on to this zip, right? You don't need to go to the actual, you don't need to extract the zip, you just need to install the zip directly, and you're golden. And now once that's there, we just need to enable it. There we go. And now over here, if I go to BLOSM again, sorry, what we need to do is we need to actually configure a few settings here, right? So over here, what I need to do is I need to put a directory, and in this directory I recommend just creating a space on your computer where you have quite a bit of memory on your hard drive, just because everything that we take from Google Maps is just going to be stored here, so Blender can actually use this information, right? So over here I've just created a specific folder for this one, so I'm just going to hit accept. And now what we need to do is, you remember that Google API key that we got previously? We actually need to paste it here, right? So this is actually saying that Blender, you know, we've got the permission to use the plugin. And over here, we just need to paste our Google Maps key, right? And as I mentioned previously, you do not share this key with anyone, because if they do have your key, that means that they can start extracting Google Maps here. And then if you are on a paid plan, you are going to be charged for it, right? So this key you keep private. So all we need to do is just put our directory and our Google Maps 3D tiles key, and that's it. Just click on these three dots here. In case you don't have auto save preferences ticked, you should by default. In case you don't, just hit save preferences. And now let's get into Blender. So as soon as I close that, what you want to do is you want to press N on your keyboard. This is like an actual toolbar, and your add-ins are normally installed here, right? So in order to extract Google Maps, it's incredibly simple. You just need to click on BLOSM here. And then the first thing we need to do is we just need to click on select. So you can see as soon as we click on select, a Google Chrome web page will open for us, right? And now this part's really simple. All you have to do is just click on search, and then you just need to select on the area you want to capture. So on this part, I'm going to do London Shoreditch, because I've done this previously on my render doc example, and we can compare them. And over here, I'm just going to click on show rectangle selection. One thing I'm going to say is for your first try, limit, kind of just play with the sizes here, because I'm actually going to show this in the tutorial in a minute or two, the different sizes and how long it takes, especially, you know, when it comes to level of detail. So just keep in mind, but for your first try, I'd say do something fairly small, like I'm doing here. And then all you want to do is just hit copy here, right? And for those of you that don't know, if I extract this, you can see the coordinates are updating right on the bottom left here. So this is what Google Maps is actually using, and then we're just copying it, a string of code. And then if I go back to Blender, all I have to do is hit paste here, and you can see this has updated. And then I'm just going to say I actually want to use Google 3D tiles here. And then over here, you can leave these two fine. And then for the level of detail, like I said, in a minute or two, I'm going to show the different examples, as you can see. But for this example, I'm going to do buildings with more details, right? So once I've done that, I'm just going to hit import. And now as soon as you hit import, Blender's going to look like it's not doing anything, but it is in the background. And to make sure that it is doing something, what you can do, I mean, you can trust this, but just for those of you that are curious, you can go to that folder that you saved, you know, where you set the directory. And then over here, if I go to 3D Tiles and I go on Google, we can see that these files are updating, right? So if I just click on it, you can see that there is stuff that's, you know, our file sizes are changing, and also you can see this new file is being created every second. So it is kind of extracting something and it's processing something in the background. Okay, so here's a capture test that I done, right? So this is a bit larger than the one I'm showing for the tutorial, but I just want to make a point. So this city here, as you can see, it's not the biggest one, but the level of detail that I done for this one was buildings with more details, right? So as detailed as it can be. This took me over 15 minutes to capture, right? This is a fairly large, but also not the biggest kind of area, right? Another capture test that I done was this one. And this one was on the level of details of separate buildings, right? So as you can see, we did lose a little bit of quality there, but it wasn't the biggest, especially if you zoom out. But if you zoom in, you know, you can see that you are losing quite a bit of resolution there. So keep that in mind. But this one only took me 1 minute. So keep that in mind, all right? As you can see, it was much faster. And if you're zooming out and you need an AXO, maybe you want to prefer to choose this one. The next one I done was, instead of separate buildings, I done groups of buildings, and as you can see here, we start losing resolution, just so you know, but this one was almost instant. And the very last one that I done was a very large city, or very large capture of London. As you can see here, this one took a few minutes, and for the level of details, I done districts, right? I didn't even do whole city. And this, relative to initial import, does do what it says on the tin, right? So if I go here and I just push this there, you can see that as my city starts expanding, or the more that I capture the area, you can see that it starts growing. This is because Google, well, this is because the BLOSM plugin will actually automatically align your capture, right? Because it is basing it to the relative import. So you can do something like a very low mesh quality far away, and then you know, you can embed something with a higher level of detail closer. So that's actually something you can do to maybe save a bit of your file size. And of course, you can join these objects. So yeah, maybe just keep that in mind. Okay, here we are. So this selection took me about 2 minutes or so. Okay, quite decent. And now it looks like nothing has been done, right? But if you go to the top right here, you can see it says Google 3D Tiles and Google 3D Tiles, right? So you get a container and then the object, for those of you that don't know Blender. So all you have to do is just zoom out a bit. And now look at this. We've got our Google Maps selection, right? Now, if you export a really, really big part of your city, you might not be able to see everything. And what you need to do is you just need to go into this view here. And then what you need to do is you need to extend your file clip offset, right? So for some of you, if you actually import something very big, it might look something like this, right? So all you have to do is just extend this file clip offset. So maybe make it, instead of the default 1000, something like 2000, if your scene does require you to do that. And over here, by default, it looks like we don't have the texture, right? That's just the Blender by default. So if you just click on the top here and you hit viewport shading, look at that. We've got our Google Maps extracted with its textures, right? And you can zoom in, and as you can see, it's quite decent detail, right? I mean, overall, the fact that how easy this was to capture, simply amazing, okay? So now I'm going to show you a step that you need in order to actually process all these different materials into one. So if I just click on expand here, and if I click on this little material tab over here, you can see that we have loads of different materials here, right? This isn't going to export nicely, and it's actually going to prevent us from exporting it as a clean FBX or as one clean geometry. So this is where Simply Gone comes in, okay? So what we need to do first of all is just click on our mesh here, and then we need to go to Simply Gone, okay? Now what you need to do is you need to click Add LOD Component, you need to go to Basic, and you want to hit Aggregation with Material Baking, okay? As soon as you click on that, you need to expand it over here, and then you have a few settings here, okay? So by default, your material casters is going to look like this. You just want to click on plus, and you want to hit on advanced, and then you just want to hit color caster, and that's it. Just leave that like that. Now what you want to do is you want to go to mapping image settings, and then output material settings, and then this texture width and height is very, very dependent on your scene. If you do an enormous city, you are going to have to make this texture say something like 10,000 or maybe 15,000, right? You are going to have to make them the same value. And the reason for this is something I'm going to show you right now. Okay, so I've got a fairly decent mesh here. So if I go here and I just click on my object here, you can see I actually have to click on an object for it to say process, and it will say Google 3D Tiles. So say, for example, let's say if I made this 4,000, all right, just as a test, just to show you guys something. So if I go here and I hit 4,000, and I click on the mesh and I hit process, This will take a while. This might take a bit longer than the actual extraction of Google Maps because it's automatically packing the textures for you. Don't pan around in Blender, don't do anything, just click on it and wait for it to do its thing. This can take a few minutes, probably 10-15 minutes. Okay, so right now it's been like 30 seconds, and as you can see the progress has gone up to 5. Like I said, don't pan or move your camera because it will affect this. Just leave it and let it work. So when it's done, you are going to get a new object here that's called process mesh mode, right? Or process meshed. So this is what it looks like. If I hide this here, okay, when I done 4000, you can see that our object, right? So if I hide this process mesh and if I look at our new one, you can see that it doesn't look that good. The main reason why it doesn't look that good is if I go to my shading here, right? We can see that there isn't a big difference between our process mesh in terms of the actual mesh itself without the texture. The main problem was that our texture wasn't big enough, right? So if you have an enormous city, you do need an enormous texture in order for it to like maintain its detail. So 4000 for this example wasn't big enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this, okay? I'm going to leave my settings here, and then I'm just going to expand this to, let's say, something like, I'm going to do something like 15,000, okay? Don't do something like 150,000, but do something like 15,000. You are going to have to play with this depending on how big you need your scene. But for this one, I am going to have to go back and I'm going to have to process again, right? And one thing to note, like I said, this process does take quite a bit of time. So one thing to note is that if you do extract a large mesh from BLOSM, that is going to take quite a bit of time. But this process, in terms of making all of these materials go into one clean material, so it makes it easier in your architectural program and easier for export, this is going to take quite a bit of time itself, all right? Don't underestimate this step either. Okay, there we go. So we can see our process mesh works, right? And it looks much better than the previous one. So if I go here and I turn this on or off, you can see that it's basically the same quality in terms of the mesh. Maybe we are losing a bit of stuff there, but I mean, overall, it seems okay, right? So the quality of these pixels does matter. You can obviously only go up to a certain amount in Blender in terms of the image size. Okay, and from this example, you can see that when I made the texture width and height 7,000 instead of 10,000, it looks basically the same, right? So say if I go here, so you can see that sometimes you don't always need 10,000. This mesh is a little bit smaller than the other one, but you know, if I did make this smaller, you probably wouldn't be able to tell that much. But this is something I want to show you guys, right? The fact that this value isn't always going to be consistent. You are going to have to like tweak this value, because if you do end up making this, say something like 10,000 or something really excessive, it is actually going to have implications on some of the programs that you end up importing later, right? Because it is going to be a very heavy texture file. So sometimes Recap Photo can't import this, and I'm going to show you this later on in the video. So just keep that in mind, that this is a value that you are going to have to tweak and change, okay? But what we need to do now is we can actually delete this one here, our previous one, right? And we need to delete our previous Google 3D tiles. And this mesh looks a little bit darker, but overall what we want to do is we want to, if you go to this material that you've gone here, simply gone cast material, right? If you see this base color, if you expand it, you can see that this base color, or this image that it's got, is called base color 0.001, right? That's the one that we've done. The reason why I've got base color 0 is because you remember when I've done that previous test of the texture width being 1000 or the default one, this is one that's generated. So if I click on that one there, you can see it doesn't really fit the texture anymore, but this is the one we want to use, right? Or the one that you've gotten from this, from the one that's on your current live model. So what I want to do now is, like I said, I want to remove this here. So I just want to hit this minus on Blender, and we've only got our mesh here. But now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create add new material, right? So it's a new material, and now for base color, I'm going to click on this little icon here, this little yellow one, and I'm going to add an image texture. And for the image texture, I'm just going to add that base color, the one that I've gotten from my latest mesh. And as you can see, this thing looks a lot brighter, a lot cleaner. And now what we can do is we can actually export our mesh if we wish. However, I am going to show you how you can actually remove part of geometry from your mesh, just in case you want to actually put a proposed building on there, right? Okay, so more things about Blender. If we press N again, we're going to hide our mode. And let's say if you want to save your settings, so you don't have to keep on doing this, because if you open Blender again, these settings will change. What you can do is you can actually just go to these little icons here, and you can hit save pipeline, right? So if I go back to my BLOSM thing, and you can save it as my pipeline, that's fine, whatever it is, and you can just hit save. And now, if you just change something, so let's just say if I delete everything here, this is what it will look like again in the future for you. But if you are using this workflow quite a bit, what you can do is you can just click on this one and you can hit load pipeline, and you can go to that previous folder that you had, can hit on my pipeline or whatever you call it, and look at this. It saved the settings that we had before in terms of our resolution and also the material caster, right? So one like little neat thing, so useful tip in case you want that. However, like I said, let's look at how we can actually edit our site out in Blender, right? So from my previous tutorial, I actually took out this building. And one thing I need you guys to know is that through shortcuts in Blender, if the main shortcuts I'm going to show you for now is actually on your number pad, right, for your keyboard. So if I press 5 on my keyboard, I go to orthographic mode, and I can switch between parallel and orthographic. If I press 7 on my keyboard, I go into plan mode. If I press 9, I go into the bottom mode. And then, like I said, if I go to, if I press 6, I can start rotating around my camera. Same thing with 4. And then if I do 2 and 8, I kind of start affecting the kind of angle, right, in Blender. Also, if I press 1 or 3 or 9, I do start going into these other orthographic views. So I can go on 7 and I can hit on plan. Right now in Blender, we're at the object mode, right? If we go here and we go to edit mode, okay, what we can see is we can see all these individual points that make up our mesh in Blender, right? And this is what we need to select in order to remove our object. So if I press 7 here, and then if I press 6, so I just start, moving around my mesh so it's easier to select. And if I want to press 5, so it's in a clean plan view, what I can do is I can just hover over this, and instead of tweak, I'm just going to do select lasso, right? And now over here, let's say if I want to get rid of this building, I can just select everywhere around this, right? Like you normally would in Photoshop or whatever you do. And now what I can do is I can press delete on my keyboard. I'm going to hit delete vertices. Well, now look, only the top parts of the face were selected. So if I go edit undo, it's going to remember my selection. And like I said, only the top parts of my faces were selected. What we need to do is we need to press 7 on our keyboard again. And now what we need to do is I'm just going to press escape. I need to go up top. I need to select another point. And over here, there's this thing that's called toggle X-ray, right? So I'm just going to click on that. And now over here, if I start selecting the points, it's going to select all the points that are selected within here, right? Whether it's on the top shape or not, as long as this is there, because we're in X-ray mode, which is kind of like wireframe, if I select it now, it's going to select everything, right? Going through the surface. So now if I press delete, and I press delete vertices, we've gotten rid of that building. And there's a few points here, which I just recommend deleting. So I'm just going to press delete here, delete vertices. And now if I go back to my object mode, we can see our texture and everything still remains the same, but I've actually removed that mesh so I can actually put our proposed building in there, which is great. However, one thing that you might find a bit annoying in your CAD software is that this isn't going to import to your origin, right? Or you might want to set it to make it easier to import. So if I pan around here, we can see that this is my kind of origin in the 3D software, and it's probably going to align with your one, but we probably want this to match with our proposed floor level and probably make this the center point, right? So what we can do is we can go back to edit mode here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to tweak. And now what I can do is I can just select one of these points here. So let's say if I just want, if I just go to select box. And let's say if I want this point to be my kind of origin point. So what I can do is I can press Shift S in Blender and I can do cursor to selected. So our cursor is now on that point. And now what I can do is I can go back to object mode, right? And I'm going to go object up top, set origin, and do origin to 3D cursor, okay? So now over here, this origin is at the 3D cursor, okay? It's not there anymore. But now, let's say if I click on this object, and if I go to my properties here, if I go to this object mode, okay, for some reason it didn't set, but like I said, as long as your point is there, if you just click on it and you go to object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor, okay? Here we go, we can see that nothing has changed, but our object has updated its coordinates here. So now if I just zero it out, or if I reset the position, if I just click on 0 here, 0 and 0, look at that. Our object is now flat on our grid. And just to confirm this, if I press Shift S again, and if I say I want my, my cursor to the world origin, so this is always like 0, 0, 0, or the flat point of it, here we go, it's back in the original position, and this now is my origin of the mesh, right? So when I export this into another software, this is where the origin of the scene is going to be, and it just makes it easier for our proposed building in terms of positioning it, right? And as you can see, really simple here. And one thing I forgot to mention is that through the BLOSM plugin, this mesh is actually to the correct scale. Through RenderDoc it wasn't. And just in case you want to like check this, what you can do is you can go to edit, you can go to preferences again, and you don't have to do this, I'm just showing you. If we just go to measure it, you know, just make sure it's enabled. For you, by default, this wouldn't be. And now if I just press N on my keyboard and I open up this toolbar, if I go to view, and I do have to be in edit mode for this, if I go to, I'm just going to disable the X-ray here. If I go to measure it tools, if I say to it, add a segment, so if I select 2 points, for example, if I just say, I don't know, between this point and this point, and now if I hit segment, right, you can see it will add a segment for us. Or there was a few down here that was set for me before. Yours is probably going to look like this. So if I just go from there to there and I hit add segment, you can see we're going to get this. And now if I hit show, you can see this little thing popped up here, right? I can make the text a bit more prominent. So let's say if I make it something like red, and I can probably expand it a bit more just by hitting this cogwheel. I don't need to, but I'm just showing you guys an example. But we can see from there to there is 8.64 meters, and that's correct. I mean, I know that this mesh is correct because it's directly from the Google Maps API, but I'm just showing you that. And then you can obviously just hit hide over here. Okay, so the final thing that we need to do before we start saving our file is actually saving this texture, right? So if I go to this little mode up top here, you can see that we have a few different stuff, right? So right now we are in the actual 3D viewport, but one thing I want you to do is actually go to the image editor, right? And over here you can see a few stuff, but if you click on this little part here that says, you know, over here is how we can actually select the texture that we've got. So over here for the space color 001, this is our texture that fits the entire mesh, right? This one mesh. And what you'd need to do is, I mean, as you can see, you can even see some facades here, but it's quite cool. And this was the reason why, you know, before the mesh was really kind of ugly, to be honest, because the resolution wasn't big enough. So if I just go here between base color 0, you can see the difference in sizes, right? In terms of why one has a lot more detail because it had a lot more pixels. So if we just go here, what we want to do is we want to go to image, save as, and you want to save this in anywhere on your computer. Well, ideally to your export folder where you want this. So I'm just going to go to BLOSM tutorial, and I'm not going to rename it anything. I'm just going to leave the settings same. I'm just going to hit save as image. Okay. And now what we can do is we can go, as soon as this is saved, give it a bit, it is a big texture. We can go back to our 3D viewport. And then I'd recommend saving your scene if you haven't done so already, just because, you know, it has been a while since we're working on this, right? So I'm just going to call this untitled.blend, just to be nice. Okay, now we're actually going to be looking at how we can export this to get into our CAD software finally, right? So the first thing that we're going to do is looking at how we can export this as a point cloud so we can get into Revit directly. So the very first thing you need to do is you just need to go to File, Export, export this as an FBX, okay? Now, when you export this as an FBX, the only things that you need to do here is that you need to make sure that the path mode is on copy, and you need to click on this little icon here that says embed textures, right? And there's one more thing that you need to do is you need to make sure that forward is set on Y forward, and now you just need to hit export FBX. And this is the reason why you have to choose the forward axis to be on the right position, otherwise your site will be in the wrong axis, right? So just make sure you keep that in mind. And as soon as that file is exported, you just want to check it. You just want to go to your export folder, open the file, and then it will open with the Windows default 3D viewer. And over here, you can see we've got our mesh with our texture, right? So everything looks golden, so we know that we can carry on with the next step. And one thing that I want to show you guys, which is quite interesting, is the fact that this texture alone, right, just the texture is 150 meg, right? Remember, we've embedded this texture directly into this FBX, so the mesh was only about 30 kilobytes, but this texture has taken up 150. That's why I said it can take quite long and it can get quite heavy if you have a larger city, right? So all we have to do now is just open up Recap Photo. As soon as that's open, all we can do is just import that mesh and then we can export it, right? So over here, Recap Photos imported quickly, just going to close it. I'm just going to go to load model, right? That's all we need. And then I'm just going to select this one. I'm going to hit open, okay? Your model should open quite fast. And essentially all we're using Recap Photo for is just importing our FBX mesh and then exporting it into a different format, right? We're literally just using it for file conversion. We don't need to change any settings in here. Okay, and something that I want to show you guys is that this FBX that I have open is the 190 FBX file, right? This thing is quite big. As we can see, Windows Viewer is fine with it. I mean, you know, this is the one that had the 10,000 width and height, and this has the overall extent of the city. However, when I import this into Recap Photo, as you can see, it says there's some issues that are found. You can see that the mesh loads fine, however, the textures don't load with it. That's because the textures were so big that it wasn't actually able to process it. However, if I go back to the other file that I had open, so if I go to this one, this is the untitled FBX01, as we can see, this file was 80 meg. I've only cropped this city by a little bit, But the main part that made the file size so much smaller was the fact that I made the material width 7,000 instead of 10,000, right? And as you can see, this looks fine. And recap photo will actually open this one perfectly fine. So if I just go file, close, load, and if I open up O1, open, overwrite, this part's completely fine. But you're going to see here now that we aren't going to get any errors, and that recap photo can open this one. And this is what I was saying to you before. You do need to be careful with one, the extents that you choose in terms of the time that you load, but also the texture resolution, right? Because I know that some people are just going to want to max out their settings because they think it gives them the best results, but your programs won't actually be able to open it, right? You do have to find the kind of solution in between. Especially, I've got quite a powerful computer, if I'm being honest. I don't think everyone, especially if you're a uni student on your laptop, you're going to be able to process some of these models. So just keep that in mind. But as we can see, recap photo opens this one's okay, opens this one fine. Okay, and in order to export this model, all we have to do is just go to export, export model, and then our file format is going to be RCS, right? And then the points per meter squared, you just leave that at 100. It's fine for this. And also I found that sometimes if you change it for some people, the textures won't export. So just leave it at 100 and you'll be totally fine. So now we're just going to export this as entitled 01. Sometimes this can take like between 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the size of the actual mesh. It is a long process, but all you have to do is just wait for it, yeah? Okay, and soon as the point cloud's done, all we have to do is just go to a 3D view or view of your choice, and we just go to the Insert tab in Revit, Point Cloud, and then I'm going to choose this one that I've done, right? So here I'm going to choose, you can choose center to center, or if you actually set the origin like I recommended in Blender, you can do origin to internal origin. And if I hit open here, just wait for it. If we zoom in and out, we can see it load. And one thing to note, just in case you're a student and you're not too familiar with point clouds, if you hover over it, you will get this kind of colored grid. It might get a little bit annoying. So what you can do is you can just click on this once, right? And as soon as it's selected, we can pin it. And then once it's pinned, we can go down to the bottom here and we can choose select pinned elements, right? So if this is crossed, now if our, if our mouse is over this, we're not going to be able to select it. However, if this was off or active, you can see that even though it's pinned, we can select it. So this might just be a little bit of help. So you can actually, you know, rotate around your site and then you are able to see what's going on. And one thing to note is that obviously with point clouds, the closer you go in, it's obviously going to appear less dense than further away. So you do get this kind of, this kind of vague look for it. But panning around your site, it looks really good. These will be really good for some images as well. And like the reason why this is helpful is say if we go to insert, link Revit as well, and we link in our proposed building, I can obviously look at it from a plan view, or our plan view. You see, this is going to be very useful when you're going to start deciding where your building goes, for example. Let's say if you don't want to work with Enscape, but you can actually align your building there, right? So as I've done here, probably a bit more accurate, but look at this. So now if I go to my 3D view, as I mentioned before, because we set level 0 in Blender through our origin, this level 0 of course automatically aligns with it, which is fantastic as well. So look at this. I mean, if we made this realistic, or overall it's just a good base point, right, in terms of when you want to actually align your building to context and actually work with stuff. And of course you can actually measure distances if you know what's what. All right, it might be a bit better on the site view or another view, but hey ho, you now have Google Maps into Revit directly through the use of a point cloud. So next up, I'm actually going to show you how you can bring the textured mesh into Enscape, so you can use it for stuff like visualizations, just in case you're not happy with the fact that, you know, when you zoom in, it starts getting a little bit vague. Okay, so in order to get our actual file into a visualization software like Enscape, we are going to have to choose a different setting. I'm not sure why, but this is just something that I found out works a bit better. So what we need to do is we need to go to File, Export, and then we need to choose Wavefront, or which is a .obj, right? So when you click on this one, all you have to do is just make sure geometry, if you expand it, you just need to make sure write materials is done, and you definitely need to make sure that previous step where we saved the texture was done. With the FBX copying and embedding it, you could get away with it, but not this one. Then you just want to hit it and you want to hit Export OBJ, right? However, if you are going to import this kind of textured mesh into, say, Sketchup or Rhino, you can use the FBX that we previously exported from the point cloud. This is specifically something that I've had to do in order to get it into Enscape, which I'm going to show you now, right? Because in this tutorial, I'm mainly focusing on the Revit workflows. So we've got the point cloud and the Enscape workflow. Okay, and now let's say we want to bring our mesh into Enscape in Revit, right? Because we actually want to use this for renders. So what we can do is we can actually go to the Enscape tab, And in case your UI doesn't look like this, I am on version 3.5 currently, just so you guys know. And essentially what I'm going to do is we just need to open up the asset library, okay? And now what we need to do is we need to click on this little plus down here because we're going to add a new custom asset, right? We can't actually import the FBX into Revit directly with the textures the way they're currently mapped, so we're going to use Enscape to do this. So you just want to click on switch to custom asset editor, and then over here you want to hit import geometry, and for this one you want to import the OBJ, right? You can import the FBX, but I've tried this and I feel like importing the OBJ works better, so I'm just going to hit import OBJ. However, this is going to take a while. This is quite a heavy file even for Enscape, so because we are importing such a large piece of geometry, and as you can see here, for now it says not responding, totally fine. This will take a bit of time, right? And over here we can see that it has imported, okay? And now, one reason why I recommend the .obj is because this actually loads the texture for us automatically. When I tried .fbx, we actually had to manually insert the texture. It isn't that much trouble, but it's just nice to have, right? Just because it's really easy for us. And look, the orientation is completely correct for us as well, which is another important thing, because if you use the FBX for recap photo or Rhino, it's going to be one way. However, in Enscape, it's going to be another one. So as you can see here, we've got our mesh that's in Enscape. And just like Blender, if you press 7 on your keyboard, once you're in this preview mode, oh sorry, no, I believe it's 5 on your number pad, you get your plan view, 2, 6, 8, 4, get to your elevation views. So I'm just going to go 5. Just go back on plan view. I can press my right, I can hold my right mouse button down, so I can start orbiting around this. Left to move, but then also if I hold shift and control and I zoom, I can zoom in a bit faster. And essentially what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to set a screenshot of it here, right? So over here I can name my custom asset, which I recommend you do. So I'm just going to call this Shoreditch London, description, whatever you need it to do. You can adjust these as you need in terms of roughness and all that stuff, but I'm just going to leave it as it is. For the sake of the tutorial, feel free to edit this yourself, but we don't actually have a map, so that's actually totally fine. But see if this makes a difference for your renders. And then this preview is going to load. We'll let it load for a second, just give it a sec. And if you did actually want to put a placeholder geometry, because this is actually just going to set as a bounding box, you can do this. I might make another tutorial, but I feel like it's getting long already. So all we have to do now is just click on this thumbnail, because we actually have to generate a thumbnail for our Enscape asset before we save it and push it through. That's just one of the rules that it has. So as soon as that's done and we filled in our title and description, you can see it says save changes and export, and that's exactly what I'm going to do here. Over here you can see it says asset exported, so I'm just going to close this. And then as soon as that's done, you can see I have a few custom assets here because I've obviously tried it for this tutorial and a few other things. However, as soon as it's loaded, just keep in mind custom assets do take a while to load, especially because I have tried quite a few map versions of this, so I've probably got a gig of just random Google Map assets loaded everywhere. Alright, so as we can see, they're loading now, and these ones are new, and the one that I've actually done just now is this one, I believe, Shoreditch London. There we go. So I'm just going to click on it. And now over here, look at this. If I zoom out a bit, I can place it. I mean, you did have to see the fact that you're zooming out for it. And now if I go 3D, it just looks like a box, right? This is because it's a bounding box. This is what placeholder geometry does. Feel free to look at other tutorials on YouTube or check out my channel later on if I upload something. However, this is our context site. So if I open up Enscape now, all right, and now look at this, we now have Google Maps loaded directly into Enscape so we can use it with our renders, right? One thing to note though, of course, the fact that Google Maps is a photorealistic thing, so they do have shadows hard baked in them. So even if I move my shadows all the way here, you know, you can see a shadow there and there. That is something you are going to have to live with. It's a photo of the world. Shadows do exist in the real world. All right, now I'm going to show you another trick here. If I press 5 on my keyboard, so I get the bird's eye view. Now, if I also go to orthographic, zoom out a bit, and if I press 5 just to make sure it's perfectly aligned, if I go to my settings here, my visual settings, if I go to render quality ultra, image, and if I just go to output, and now if I go here and if I make my I can choose export all this different stuff, apply alpha channel. And now what I can do is I can just go to main, and then if I just cancel this, I believe, and now if I hit render, Okay, screenshot. And now if I save this somewhere, so let's just say if I go back to my tutorial folder, I'm just going to hit Enscape and save, right? Now if I open up Photoshop, right, I think, let's see if you know where I'm going with this. The fact is, I can't actually see what's in this bounding box. It would be a lot nicer for my build. It would be a lot nicer in Revit if I could actually see what buildings were where, right? But the fact that this is an Enscape asset, and the fact that this is such a heavy mesh, I can't actually just load the mesh in itself as a placeholder because it will crash Revit. So we can do a smart workflow. So if I open up Photoshop, so I'm just going to open up Photoshop. There we go. Okay. And now what I can do is if I just select everything, I didn't even need a mask in all fairness, but I'm just going to do this. And now that I've got this, if I just go to image and I go to trim, right, and I say base it on this transparent pixels and I hit OK, this is going to give us our perfect bounding box that we see in Revit here, right? So if I just now export this or save this, same thing, and this one is just going to call this one trimmed. You know, you can save this as you want now, but it's fine. Okay, so now in Revit what we can do is we can go to insert and we can choose link image, and then that image that we actually exported from Photoshop, the one that was trimmed exactly to the bounding box, what we can do is we can just open this. And now over here, all you have to do is just make sure that lock proportions are ticked, right? And for draw layer, you can do foreground, and I'm just going to place this in one corner there, right? And then one corner there. You can make it exact if you want, but this is just for the tutorial. Sometimes I found you can snap, but for some reason I can't right now. But essentially what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to select this image and I'm going to make it on the background for now, right? And now all I can do is I can actually just click on the planting. I don't actually need this, so I'm just going to hit hide in view, hide elements, right? And now if I pin this, you can even group them just to make them a bit more stable. But right now what I can do is if I go to link Revit and I link in this previous building that I have and I open, you see over here I can even start drawing what I want to show up in my Enscape space because I've got this reference that I've taken from the render. Or over here, if I want to be a bit cheeky, I can just do this and then rotate it how we need. So this is just obviously looking at it as a rough example. How did I want it before? I think I want it like that, but 180, that makes a bit more sense, right? So I'm just going to do there to there. And now if I go to Enscape, or if I just go to my 3D view here, and if I go to Enscape, and if I resume it here, okay? If we close the asset library, that'll be fine. And now look at that. I now can see where I want my building placed and everything else that I'm modeling because I've actually taken that Enscape photo, I've matched it to the Enscape bounding box, and now everything that I want to position there will be, will align. And like I said before, the fact that we set our origin to the correct point in Blender so that everything that we put on level 0 now matches with that point that we set makes it even easier, right? And now look at this, we have Google Maps in Revit, right, which makes it so much nicer for our Enscape renders. I mean, even if you go far away, it'll look quite decent as a study. And I know this isn't a perfectly beautiful solution for Google Maps, but I mean, it is definitely better than nothing. The fact that you've got it for free and the fact that you can actually use this to align other references is absolutely insane, right? I really wish I had something like this for me in university. But now let's look at how we can import that FBX into Rhino, because I know a few other people like that. Okay, so while I was editing this video, I realized I actually forgot the workflow in order to import this maps into Sketchup. It's really easy. However, we do have to export in a different file format because Sketchup only has limited formats that it accepts. So what you want to do first of all is just select the mesh, make sure that's selected in case you do have multiple in your scene. You're going to go File, Export, and then you want to choose the Collada file, yeah, the .dae. And then over here, you just need to make sure that when you go to Geometry or when you go Main, you do Selection Only, and that's it. You do have to make sure that the texture was exported before, like I mentioned previously, but if you've done that and you baked the texture and you saved it, if you just hit Export Collada, as soon as that's done, it should be quite a quick process. And over here you can see we get a .dae file and we also get the texture saved. That's why I said you did have to save this before in Blender like the previous steps. Okay, and as soon as we're inside SketchUp, all we have to do is just go to File, Import, and you do need SketchUp Pro for this. Actually, maybe I'm not sure, but maybe this is something you guys have to check just to make sure that you can import the .dae file, right? And in case you don't have SketchUp Pro, you can look at all these other files that will work. Maybe a DWG will, but I just done a Collada, so I'm just going to hit Import. It shouldn't take too long, maybe a minute max. And you can see that now we can choose our point to place our component. So I've just chosen there. And now if I, you can do this with more precision in your model. But now look at this. We have our Google Maps obviously imported into SketchUp, and you do see the meshes from the edges. So if you do want to get rid of this, what you can do is you can actually go to Window, and you can go to Default Tray, and you can enable Soften Edges, right? Now if I click on this component here, and then if I just make this go down, down, and before Soften Edges, this part on the tab here, let me just actually bring this down because I think my camera is going to cover it. I can actually hit Soften Coplanar, right? This might take a second because it is a very large mesh, and then I can bring this angle up a little bit more, right? So as I do this, you can see we are losing our edges for this geometry. I do think you are going to see quite a bit of it still. As you can see, we are losing just a little bit of quality as we do this. Equally so, what you could do is just go to your drawing mode. So if you go to View, and you go to Edge Style, and you take off Edges and Profiles, you are going to get a cleaner mesh, but this might impact your overall building, well, your overall style for this. However, you can do two different exports. But as you can see here, the moment you turn off your edges, this looks okay. The Soften Coplanar part did help, just in case you prefer to have that on for your building, but maybe turn it off for this specific component. Okay, so here we are inside Rhino. This is just another software that I'm sure people would want this concept to be in. So you can just go File, Import, and then you can click on the FBX that you've actually previously exported. This is the FBX one, right? So this is the one where the texture was actually embedded within the file, and then the forward was on Y forward. For Rhino, you can actually use this file. You don't have to use a .obj, but as soon as you hit import, you can just leave it as it is, and you can scale it as you need. So I'm just going to hit yes, just to make sure it's okay. And then as soon as it's in, you can zoom out a bit, right? So we can see our mesh has imported, okay? And then if I just make sure that this is on rendered, and let's just give it a second, look at that. We can see that we have our Google Maps mesh straight into Rhino, right? Through the FBX one as well. And of course, this is following the geometry. So this is pretty amazing. It's gotten even easier to get Google Maps into our architectural workflows. Of course, this quality doesn't compare to a surveyed model, but the fact that you can actually get a textured mesh of the real world, right? Because this is using Google Maps API. It's absolutely insane. It's just getting easier and easier. I do hope you guys find this helpful. I mean, I really wish I had this stuff when I was a student, or I mean, even early on before you maybe get a site survey, right? Maybe for some bids or whatever, just to work to some relatively accurate information for free and have some good points for your visualizations. So yeah, if you guys did enjoy this tutorial and this workflow, like I said before, I would very much appreciate it if you can leave a like, join the Discord community, check out the links down below in the comment. And yeah, that was it for this video. Take care guys. Cheers.